All right, we're back at Warren Plains at the depot where Robert E. Lee and his daughter Agnes stepped off the train on March the 28th, 10 o'clock at night. No hotel room, nothing, nowhere to go, nothing to do or where to stay, because they did not want to tip anybody off as to where they would be staying. There is a local hotel, and I will turn this around. I believe this was a hotel at the time. And I guess they could have got a room there, and that may have been his plan, but no one had been told that they were coming. As luck would have it, a young ex-Confederate soldier, his name was William White, I think is his actual name, from Warrenton, had come here to pick up his sister. I don't know anything about where she had been or what she was doing. I don't know, maybe college. I don't have a clue. It doesn't say. But it just so happened that when Robert E. Lee and his daughter Agnes stepped off the train, Mr. White was standing there and, of course, immediately recognized who he was. Well, he approached Mr. Lee, introduced himself, and asked him, what's going on? Why are you here? Naturally, you're curious. And Robert E. Lee told him the story. He was coming to see his daughter's grave, and everybody here knew about Annie's passing. I mean, that was no secret. Everybody knew that the family had been here during the war and that she had passed away, and she was buried out on the Jones Springs cemetery. So he asked, Mr. White asked him, Mr. Lee, what have you got? Where are you going to spend the night? Where are you staying? And Robert Lee told him, well, I don't have anything set up. I guess I'll try to get a local accommodation. And Mr. White said, absolutely not. You're coming home with me. And he graciously accepted. So Robert and E. Lee and his daughter Agnes and Mr. White and his sister all loaded into the carriage, and they headed right out on this road which carries you straight to Warrenton. And that is exactly what they did. So we have to leave here and get on the bike, and we're going to take the trip to Warrenton. And I think you'll find this just as interesting. All right. We're heading to Warrenton. We're on Warren Plain Road. It's about 3 miles from the depot at Warren Plains to the town of Warrenton. Would have been a dirt road. Been about 11 o'clock at night. It would probably take the carriage, I would guess, 45 minutes, maybe an hour, but 45 minutes probably would be about the distance to travel at night. We're headed into the town of Warrenton. A lot of the older homes that are here now would have been here then. So quite a few of these houses were here in 1870. Some really beautiful homes. Ready to turn on Halifax Street here in Warrenton. This is it here. All right, this is the house known as Ingleside. Don't know where the name comes from, but it was the name chosen back when the home was built. The home was built in 1850 for John White and his wife Priscilla. You can see it's in pretty good shape. There's a lot of trees still in the way. I've got an old picture of the house back from the 1800s, but it looks very much like it does now. So William White went to the depot there at Warren Plains to pick up his sister on the night of March 28, 1870. And that's when he ran into Robert E. Lee and his daughter Agnes. He insisted on bringing them home. Mr. Lee was very gracious and accepted. They loaded up the carriage and they came home, and it was about probably after 11 o'clock before they got here. Almost midnight, I would imagine. William's father was John White. His mother was Priscilla. John and Priscilla White had 10 children, so they needed this big home here in Warrenton. But I think about that trip coming back from Warren Plains that night. I could imagine that Mrs. White and the adults of the house, they would have been waiting up for the daughter to come home, for the sister to come home. So they would have been up that night. I imagine the women would have been in their night clothes, waiting for the daughter to come home. And then all of a sudden the carriage pulls up, and they would have probably gone out to greet them. And all of a sudden they see a man and a woman in the carriage with them, and lo and behold, it's Robert E. Lee. I can imagine that was a bit of a shock. But that is exactly what happened. They came here that night. The White family graciously took them in, kept them for the night. I don't know if we can move around the house a little bit. This may give you a little bit better view of the home. It's still in very good shape. The next morning, which would have been March 29th, the White family prepared a carriage for Mr. Lee and his daughter Agnes. They had the horses hooked to it. They were ready to go, and it recorded in history that they left early that morning. So they would have come outside to get into the carriage. But what they found was that during the night, the word had spread. Now, I don't know how a word spreads in the middle of the night with no internet, no telephone, no way of communication other than going around and knocking on doors. But the word had spread that Robert E. Lee was in town and that he was going to see Annie's grave. So the women got together. They got all the flowers they could put into bushel baskets. And they had come that morning early and had loaded the carriage with flowers. So the carriage was totally full of flowers. And when Mr. Lee and Agnes came out to get on the carriage, they would have had probably almost overflowing with flowers to carry to the grave. It's said that they left alone, Mr. Lee and Agnes, on the carriage. So they would have, the horse stable was in the back behind the home. They would have come out here, and they had to go out on Halifax Street. They can't go the way we go now. 401 was not there at the time. So as they left Ingleside and headed down Halifax Street, the town people had come out and was cheering the Lees as they passed by. And I can imagine Mr. Lee being very gracious, tipping his hat to the ladies and waving back to them as they trotted by. Mr. Lee had not been feeling good, and so I imagine Agnes was at the reins driving the carriage, and Mr. Lee sitting beside her, and the back of the carriage full of flowers. But I think that's a pretty nice image to imagine of him driving down the Halifax street in the carriage, waving to the townspeople of Warrenton who had such great admiration for Mr. Lee. I don't know if I mentioned that John White and his wife Priscilla, who had this home built in 1850, had 10 children, so they needed a big home. Well, this would end the end of part 2 of my video. Now we move to Annie's grave. So I hope you enjoyed what I'm showing you and what history I'm bringing to you. And if you do, please hit like. That way I know I am reaching a few people. Some people like it, I hope. And as always, thank you for watching.